Hello, welcome to Values, Virtues, Morals and Ethics. My name is Magela Pillay and I am here today in the studio with Sister Denise, who has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris for over 40 years. The purpose of this show is to explore a wide variety of subjects surrounding what Sister Denise calls conventional morality, and our purpose is to debunk a lot of myths that people have about the subjects, to explore things that most of us ordinarily do not think about, and to look at particular aspects of human conduct, like why we do the things that we do, why we speak the way we do, and more specifically, how our internal functioning works. Sister Denise has a special interest in the human conscience. So I'm very excited about today's show, and I'd hope that you join me for this half an hour to listen to the words of an extremely wise person. Sister Denise, thank you very much for joining us in the studio today, and a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
The topic that's of interest to us today is that of morality and violence. Now, as we know, the world has become an exceptionally violent place. There was a time where one human being harmed another for a reason, and now we've come to the point in humanity where people harm strangers for no reason whatsoever. I want to ask you this question in twofold. What is the reason for human violence?
Well, that's a very, very deep question, because within the human being, when a person experiences hurt on any level, then they react to that by violence. So that's one of the reasons. But another reason is institutionalized violence, and that's different because that is based in attitudes. And there was an experiment done, I can't remember the name of the experimenter, but it was a very famous experiment in which the people in the experiment were told to apply electric shock to someone, and the person who was telling them to go on increasing and increasing, and even when the person was really in a lot of pain, because of the orders of the person telling them to increase the amount of pain they were administering, they didn't care about what was happening to the person. They just were following orders to a point where the person could have been killed. And that experiment showed something about the human mind, which was very disturbing, because people felt that that couldn't happen. But the experiment showed it happens very easily, and you can get people to follow orders to commit violence on someone, and they follow it just like that.
Mm-hmm. Is any human being on the planet born violent? Are people genetically predisposed towards violence? Is it learnt behavior?
Violence is like an emotion, a desire to cause harm, and you can be born with that, because if you look at the idea of the law of karma, which includes the idea that you take birth having lived before, and if in a previous birth you were a very violent person, or you were violated very badly, then you could come into your next birth with that as a predisposition, definitely.
Okay. And if somebody is extremely violent, or maybe not even such an extreme scenario, if somebody has a mild level of violence, physical violence, or an extreme level of violence, can they be cured? It's a disease. I see it as a disease in humanity. Can it be cured?
I think you would have to approach it similarly to the way that addiction recovery is approached, because violence becomes something that enables a person to manage their feelings. When a person's feelings are hurt, disturbed, and so on, they can manage it very easily with violence, because violence is a kind of a passion which overcomes a person, so that feelings of hurt and being degraded and diminished can be set aside or overcome by the person just going into violence, and even sometimes a frenzy of violence will be a reaction to hurt feelings. So if you want to cure it, then you have to do original pain work, which is very long-term, requires extremely good therapist, and it requires bringing together all the people involved in the original traumatic event, which may or may not be possible. But I think that theoretically it is possible, but it's such a big piece of work that the person who is violent has to really want to not be violent anymore, and they have to have a very powerful support system. And I don't know if there is the political or social will to put in that much energy in a person, and there are so many people who are suffering from this that I think it may be quite difficult to actually make it go away.
We see the world has become such a place where people who are ostensibly moral, or who are in positions of authority, moral authority, are indeed extremely violent, or the instrumental in perpetuating violence. Even though their hands are clean, they order others to do their dirty work for them. What is that about, and why is it that it's such a common pattern across the globe?
Number of reasons. I think one of the reasons is a person who wants something will try to get it, even if it involves committing violence, because their desire for that thing, or their desire to get power or to hold on to power, overrides any kind of feelings of humanity. And it also overrides any feelings as to whether it is all right to go for these desires, especially the desire for political power.
Sister Denise, what I notice to be a very common phenomena is a person who finds himself in a situation where they're calmly going about their life, and then violence is inflicted upon them. In other words, they're a victim. And in order for them to redress the situation, they themselves resort to violence of the perpetrator, or somebody in the vicinity of the perpetrator. And I see this on an individual level. We also see this on a political and global level, where countries that are not ordinarily the initiators of war would then go and inflict harm on another country in a retaliatory manner. Is retaliatory violence justified?
You know, there are requirements of a country to defend itself. And in a circumstance where a country is invaded by another country, then they have to defend themselves. When a person is attacked by someone, then they have to defend themselves. And so the action that you need to take in order to defend yourself. I think in law this is a lot considered. You may know better than me about that, but actions done in self-defense are definitely justifiable. I think the problem comes where a particular line gets crossed, where you are, you can say or you can claim that this is self-defense, but it's actually more than self-defense, or it's not really self-defense, it's really attack, maybe revenge.
Revenge, yes, yes.
And so we cannot say under attack you should be completely do nothing and allow yourself to be attacked, because that really doesn't seem right. Although there are a lot of people who advocate that position, I think that it's necessary for a person to, and what we do in yoga, Raj Yoga, is to try to accumulate personal power, very substantial personal power, which in a way kind of resembles the martial arts, where someone who is aggressing you, you will stand up for yourself, you will stand up to them, and if you have adequate spiritual power, you can actually neutralize their ability to inflict violence on you or anyone else. That is a possibility.
Say more about that.
Well, you have to be very highly developed yogi to do that, but it is possible. And we have anecdotes of individuals within the Brahma Kumaris movement who have been under threat by intruders in the house, people who wished to rape and to murder and all of this. We have many anecdotes where the person just absolutely went into their spiritual consciousness and the aggressor was unable to carry on and carry through with their intention to harm. And because there are so many examples of this, we know that it is very possible, and we would definitely say that that is the way one should go. But this can only be done by a person who is really connected with God and who is to some degree competent in the art of meditation.
Okay, that's extremely interesting. It's one of the secrets of being a yogi, is it not?
Well, I'll give you a little example. There was one person who was kidnapped by someone in Colombia who wanted to kidnap them in order to ransom, gain money through ransom, and they were very ready to actually torture the person, harm the person, even kill the person. But the person just totally went into their spiritual peace, and the idea came to the kidnappers. They said, well, we don't want to keep you, you better go. We don't understand why you're so peaceful. So they just let them go. You know, and there are story after story after story among our gathering of Brahma Kumaris and Kumaris, to the point where I would say that it is definitely something that one should develop, and one should have faith in that I can do this in such circumstances. And even in my own personal experience, I have had occasion to do this about 5 or 6 times in my life.
Okay. Well, that's extremely interesting. It's not something that one hears every day. So, Denise, where does morality fit into this picture?
The problem of violence and morality is that the system of morality is based in some respects on the idea that a wrong action has to be punished. And you punish a person by inflicting pain on them, which you have to do by doing violence to them. And so the system of morality in some cases will say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. and in some cultures this is done. Some people are imprisoned, some people are beaten. The system within the family, regular human family, in the name of morality, in the name of religion, very often an adult male will beat a small child and very often inflict grievous harm and feel completely justified because of their religious beliefs. And it becomes very difficult to teach a person to look at it otherwise, because their religious beliefs are very fixed in their mind, sometimes even in an irrational way. And so that becomes an obstacle, because there the morality is against the human rights of the child, is against the idea of appropriate action taken to discourage a person from performing antisocial action. And in Brahma Kumaris, part of our teaching is that you have no justification ever to strike a child, ever, for anything.
So if an adult commits an offense, what would be the spiritual answer to such a scenario?
The spiritual answer would be that if that offense is a crime in that land, then the criminal justice system must be applied. That would be the spiritual answer. Now, there are many situations where the laws of a particular country are draconian. And then people would comment saying, this is excessive use of force, this is not right. But once a person has gone against the law, then from a spiritual point of view, you can't actually do something. You protest, you go through all of the processes that are done within the possibilities, but you see, when someone is taken away and made to disappear, or they are tortured or whatever, the people who do that make sure that it's very difficult for anyone to know about it, So very forthright and brave journalists will go and chase after it, and human rights representatives will go and chase after it. But the spiritual person will say, this is wrong, but I will not do violence to the person who's doing something wrong, because that is going to increase the wrong and it's not going to resolve the problem. So really resolving the problem has to do with looking at the culture of violence. And I think the usefulness of this kind of television program is that we're really addressing the subject, and we want people to really think about the rationale of using violence for the purpose of making something right. And basically what we see is that you can never make something right by using force or by using violence. But the conventional morality says, well, we don't have any choice, we have to, I mean, there's a debate about whether you should incarcerate a person, or whether you should put them to hard labor, or whether you should kill them through some means or another. The death penalty is under debate always, and I think the spiritual position would be that you really cannot set yourself up as God in judgment and take out a person's life. You should definitely restrain them and restrict them. So imprisonment is a valid answer to the problem, but there needs to be, as far as possible, rehabilitation, because one of the things that the research I have seen has shown is that most of the people who perform extremely violent actions were severely abused as children, severely. Most of them are having mental illness, and when they are restrained and stopped from having access to the society in general, what happens? They are abused within the prison system, and so things get worse and worse and worse until they commit suicide or some other thing happens to them. So the problem is not really being addressed effectively, and I think the problem is so large and the amount of violence has reached such an extreme that the only way that it can go away is, as I mentioned in another program, once the extreme point is reached, the whole thing stops.
Okay, thus far, as far as violence is concerned, we spoke about the aggressor. Now, in each violent scenario, there's an aggressor and there's a victim. What is it in human nature that causes somebody who's in the position of a victim to continue being a victim and not empowering him or herself or removing themselves from the situation, etc.? What is that, even though the situation has become absolutely unbearable?
Well, there are many people who are trained from early childhood to be victims, and they play out that role, and they will provoke someone to victimize them. They will have extremely low self-esteem. They will be emotionally extremely dependent on the aggressor, and in some cases even they do not feel that they're alive unless they're being beaten up. It is that extreme. This especially, you find this in the case of domestic violence. And so this is why I think the whole foundation of morality and how we should raise children needs to be looked at, because many parenting practices are child abuse, and an abused child becomes a victim or a perpetrator, or it switches from time to time. And so we've got into a vicious circle as a result of the fundamental principles behind the building of moral systems. And because it has escalated to this point, to the point where you can see that there's something wrong with your fundamental principles, we have to really look at that again.
Okay. Sister Denise, there's somebody watching the show right now who has the need to hear what you are saying. It's medicine to their soul. They're in a position of being a victim. It could be a child, it could be male or female, it could be anywhere on the globe. But they do not know how to escape being a victim. What is your message to such a person?
The most important thing is to know that you are a child of God, more than a child of whoever happens to be your parents. They are souls. They are actually your brothers and sisters. They are playing out a trauma that is going on, and you need to tell yourself, I'm a child of God. I do not deserve this. I'm a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful soul. I call on God to be with me, and I will visualize myself in a very perfect and beautiful situation, and I will gather together my sense of self and my will, and I will come out of this as soon as I have enough, age and strength and wherewithal to do that. Because a child cannot just leave so easily. And when a child runs away from home, they run into another abusive situation. So just doing that is not anything other than out of the frying pan into the fire. I see. But people, the adult population in many communities, think of children as objects to be used. And then all of a sudden, when you're 18, you suddenly become a human being, So the attitude towards children in many communities is really not right. And a lot of the time it is the parent will say, well, my father did this to me and it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you. That statement has to be challenged because it is not valid. You see, these things are passed on from generation to generation to generation, and they originate at a time when the moral systems were formulated, where it was thought that, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. God wishes these people to be punished because of their crimes, and since God is busy somewhere else, I will do it for him, This is the thinking. And this is supported and sustained in a lot of the religious environments where people are very moralistic, you see.
As you speak, the word fear pops into my mind. How is fear connected to violence and morality?
Well, you control people by making them afraid, and the thing people are really afraid of is being hurt, physically hurt, I mean, I did find out that it's possible to become immune to torture. And I found that out in South Africa, where you live. But it's a very, very rare person who has got enough guts and enough strength and enough detachment to actually go through the process of becoming independent of that terrorizing that is done to people to control them through fear. I mean, if you look at history, we go back through the Spanish Inquisition, the World War II, World War I. Anytime there's a war, morality is totally suspended, and whoever is defined as the enemy, they can be treated worse than you would treat anything, and so somehow this situation of war allows people, and I find a lot of these problems go back to war. War allows people to say, okay, there are no more rules, I can do whatever I want. If you look at the book Lord of the Flies, it shows that you get a bunch of young boys on an island and they can do what they want. And so the philosophy behind that book is that people are fundamentally uncivilized, but I would beg to differ that people are uncivilized in circumstances where the natural purity of a person is violated, and then that triggers a set of behaviors that really are uncivilized. Now, in that book, you're talking about boys in sort of the English public school system, which is extraordinarily violent. You see, so it's a setup to make people violent. The colonial system is a setup to make people abusive. And so it all goes back to an attitude of we are better than them, and because of that we can do whatever we like to them, because we have power over them, you see. And this is a very, very dangerous set of ideas and principles that is very much operating in the world and has been for a very long time.
Mr. Denise, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. For those of you at home who joined us for this half an hour, I hope you managed to learn a thing or two about the state of the world's morality, what makes people violent, what makes them a victim and an aggressor, and the deepest message that Sister Denise shared today is that one can come back from that. If you find yourself either in the position of being a victim or aggressor, you can redress that and become a self-empowered person through understanding your original self. So thank you, Sister Denise, for that deep and powerful message. And back at home, we hope this conversation was of interest to you, and we hope you shared this with your friends and family. Have a good day, and thank you for joining us.